Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Our next guest is a friend, and he's a guy who's listened to our show for a while, which already makes him a wise man. But more importantly, he's a man who has quite a story to tell. And I know in reading his book for a long time, he was not a guy who was going to tell that story. Unfortunately, he did. And he wrote a book called Never Alone, a Chronicle. He is Paul Gerhard Tittel, and he joins us here this morning on the Gary Sutton Show. Paul, an honor to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me here.
Well, you wrote this book, but I was reading in the very beginning that there were a lot of people who said, you should tell that story. You should tell people what it's about. And you kind of bucked doing that a little bit for a while. Why so?
Well, it was always a way to get the time. I had a farm and so forth. And, and when I broke my ankle, my foot, and I laid down and I said, no, I have to write it. And this was the time I had to write it.
This story is a positive story about, I think, human industriousness, about wanting something out there and going after it, and about somebody always being there right by your side that was higher than both you and me together, right?
That's correct. I always had my Lord, my Maker, on my side.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the whole way through, and it's amazing. What's really neat about this story, Never Alone, a Chronicle by Paul Tittel, is you started out in, take us back a little bit. I mean, you start talking in your book about being there during World War II. I mean, you were around during World War II, so you had a chance to see the Nazis, you had a chance to see the Russians, the SS. I mean, they're all mentioned in there up close and personal. Tell us a little bit about the beginning of the story.
Yes, I was going to take you back to the 9th of May when the Hitler regime collapsed. But before that, we had about 5, 6, 7 days, perhaps, of American forces come in. And they bombarded us. They didn't do that much damage to the civilian population, to the infrastructure. They helped us, actually, not to be in a mess there. And there were some incidents where I was involved. I was at that time only 10, 11 years old, and I was sneaking around where all these areas of activities were as a kid, and I almost got knocked down by low-flying airplanes attacking the formation of the SS where they were entrenched. And so, and I had to thank my Lord that I wasn't knocked down, because we were there talking to these soldiers in the trenches, and then the Lord pulled us away just about a minute, and the planes came flying in, 4 planes, and they destroyed all these machine gun nests.
Yeah, they were actually in an area near a quarry or something
Yes.
You were talking about in your book. And you said right there was one example where, for some reason, I was spared to get away from that. If you'd have been there another minute, you could have been going the same way as those machine gunners.
Correct.
You also talk in there about America a little bit, and your father had been here at one point in time for, I think, a week, if memory serves correctly, and that one of the things he remembered about ham and eggs during the morning, right? That was something he remembered, and when you got to America, that was one of the things that you wanted to do, and you also promised yourself that you would never starve again. We come back again in a moment to when you were a child and the starving part, but it's amazing that there was America on your mind somewhere down the line there the whole time you're kind of moving through this history here in Germany.
Correct, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, you go from the end of World War II, May 7th of 1945, and you now hope the Americans are going to be the group that's staying there. You actually made friends with some Americans, did some trading, and got some different things there. And you did a lot of trading in here. I was really interested in the story. You, very resourceful person, including learning how to build a bicycle, which we'll get to in a bit. But when you heard that you hoped the Soviets were not coming in and that the Americans were going to stay, but that did not happen. You were in East Germany at that time, and the Soviets did come in. Tell us about what took place there.
Yes, we were hoping that the Yalta Agreement, which was set by all all the people who were involved in the Second World War, the British, the Americans, the Russians, and the French. I know who they were, and they said that the line between East and West Germany, and we were hoping that the line wouldn't fall on our side. And so it was that case that we were really, really disappointed when the Americans pulled back. And with my, like Gary said, I did do some trading with American soldiers. They liked us as kids. They let us slip into the tanks and go down the tower. And I had a few chickens in my possession, which laid a few eggs. And my dad always talked about the eggs and the ham and the bacon in America. He was in the States from 1924 to 1929.
Right.
Yes,
and a 5-year period, not a 5-day period, right?
And so they loved my eggs, and in return we got chocolate, which we never seen, and all other kinds of goodies. And then the Russians came in, and what was a terrible, tragic moment.
You talk about starvation, and you talk about one of the things that you remember seeing later on was a duck being accosted by I think a whole lot of other ducks, and you remembered that there were girls during that time who were accosted by many of the soldiers. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I went once to Boiling Springs, that is in Pennsylvania, a wonderful place, and you see the springs bubble out of the ground, but there were ducks, a lot of ducks there, and one hen was sitting there, and there were about 11 or so male ducks in line, and they were ready to get to the hen, and that reminded me of the girls who were subject to all kinds of harassment and actually physical abuse by the Russian soldiers, and so they did not survive that too much. They had scars on their bodies and on their mind and on their lives.
At what point in time did you decide that you were going to escape from East Germany to West Germany, ultimately making your way to the United States? Where did that kind of hatch? Because I know you said your mother died at a relatively early age, really, while the Russians were there making sure that you were eating, and at the same time she was not. But you had to have hatched that idea at some point in time. Where was it?
Well, it was in my last year of middle school and my first year of high school. Those two school years, I had lots of problem with being in high school because only the privileged people from the communists had the opportunity to attend these higher schools. And so, but I was Christian, and they knew it, and I didn't join the communistic youth organization, so they harassed me day in, day out, and I couldn't take it anymore. And that was the first and the second year of high school, and they and then on top of it, the starvation. We had nothing to eat, absolutely nothing to eat. I mean, if you talk about starvation, you haven't seen anything in this country yet as far as starving is concerned. And then then I decided I couldn't take it anymore. And my father was agreeing with me. My mom wouldn't have not. And so I decided to go to West Germany. I tried to, and when I decided I needed some means of getting there, and so when I decided to do that, we put a bike together. You couldn't get anything, but a friend of mine and I went to the junkyards and rummaged places and found pieces here and there, and finally it looked like a bike, and I took off with that, and I drove about 120 kilometers and then another 180 kilometers. My first stop was 120 kilometers, and then I had to go another 180 kilometers till I got to the border. There was really hardly a place where you could escape. I had a very good friend who used to be a vicar in the Lutheran church of ours, and that's where I went to get some good advice. That was in Saalfeld. And then that was close to the border, but he said, around here you cannot get across anymore. He had all the information, and he said, go up to where my aunt lives, there might be a chance. And I went up there, that was another 180 kilometers, and so I had to paddle that many more miles or kilometers, and I had to, and it was hard for me. I had nothing to eat at all also.
It's amazing because where you crossed over, 2 people had been killed the week prior to that, right? And so, I mean, there was, and the first time you crossed over, you got caught. Or you tried to cross over, you got caught. So tell us what that was like. That had to be just absolutely stunning for you because you're planning on getting across there, all of a sudden they nail you.
Yes, I tried to get across, and I looked and looked and looked, and I went very carefully. But then they came and they said, "What you're doing here, young kid?" And so I was 16 years old, and they said, "Get up," and they knew exactly what I was up to. I had nothing with me, and so they caught me, and they took me to the headquarters, and they put me in the attic first, and then they took me down, and I went into the jail, which was provided or established by the communists and the Russians there, and then they put me there for about a half a day. But since I was a minor, the judge let me out earlier.
You were, correct me if I'm wrong, did you say you were 76 pounds at that particular point at 16 years old?
72.
72 pounds. I mean, it's incredible. And a lot of people thought you were a lot younger than you were, obviously, at that particular point in time. You finally find a way to get across the border, and you go across, and later on you came back to visit it many years later. It was a marshland, actually, and you would have been very close. Marshland and quicksand right there. But you managed to get across the border there. And what were your feelings? You get the other side into West Germany.
It was fantastic. The feeling was fantastic, but it wasn't that easy either. I had to, it was getting dark. I did it the same day. And I was all by myself, but I went towards the woods so they couldn't see me. The guards couldn't see me. They were every so far stretched apart, were guards again, and they looked with binoculars. And I went into the woods, moved up the woods, and when I thought I was in West Germany, I had no idea. I went out of the woods, and the ladies were sitting on a bench. I asked them, "Is this West Germany?" And they just motioned and pointed to a spot where 4 guys jumped up, 2 Russians and 2 East Germans. And I ran as fast as I could, but I was so little, and they couldn't follow me, so because it was underbrush. And then I hit myself and kicked myself in the bushes, and I said, that's it, if they get you now. I was so exhausted, and I didn't want to go anymore. But then I looked around, and I saw the phosphorus sign which said, this is West Germany. Now this is the border. It said, do not cross on your own risk or you will be punished, something like that. Yes, sir.
Wow. We're going to come back. We're going to finish up the interview here with Paul Tittel. You can order the book, by the way. If you go to the website right now, neveraloneachronicle.com. That's neveraloneachronicle, CHRONICLE.com. It's all one word. And you can also find his email and order it from there as well on this particular page. Or you can go to Facebook and find Never Alone. It's a great book, a chronicle by a man who has lived it, a man who crossed the border during a time where people were being shot on a regular basis and then made his way to America. Let's find out about what happened when he got to America when we come back. Paul Gerhard Tittel with us here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA. We're talking with Paul Tittel this morning, who has written a book, Never Alone, a chronicle. Go to the website, neveraloneachronicle.com, and you can actually check out the book. And don't be afraid to like it on Facebook, as I just did a moment ago. But there was a pastor here. This gives you an idea. in May 6th of this year. Pastor, dear Mr. Tittel, many, many thanks for writing Never Alone, a Chronicle, and for giving me an autographed copy. When I picked it up to read, I couldn't stop. So enthralling is the account that it provides. And I had the same experience. I've read it twice now. I did it again last night before I went to bed. It's not a very long book, but man, has it got a lot of stuff packed into it. The personal experience of a boy whom the Communist Party would rather have had dead is a fascinating record of suffrage, courage, determination, and ultimately liberty. Its value is enlarged by the ease with which it reads and its clarity of expression. For those who've never heard, and for the rest who may forget, the story had to be told and ought to be read. I hope that many will read this little volume. I'm glad that I did. Thanks for the pleasure and enlightenment. It has been, to me, with gratitude, John McKnight, pastor of the Reformation Bible Church. The book here is fascinating because eventually you make it from West Germany, where you actually, I guess, start a little business there for a while, and you showed you have some acumen for business, and then you moved on eventually to the United States. How did that finally all take place?
Well, I was in West Germany then 5 years, and I always wanted to come to the United States. My dad was talking about all the time about the United States. He was here for 5 years,
right?
And so I got myself that mindset, and I also wanted to have a higher education. And at that point in time, I couldn't get it in West Germany. So I thought, well, maybe I can get it in the United States. It is so I went to the consulate in Hamburg and applied for a visa, for a visa to come to the United States to immigrate. And not a visa that I just stay here for a student visa. No, I wanted to stay here. And so I did, and I got the visa in a couple of years, and I had to wait for it, not just like the ones down in Mexico who come in and don't have to wait at all. I had to wait over 2 years, matter of fact, and I got it, and I was so happy and glad that this country would take me up, and so I came to the United States, and when I got here, it was fantastic. I found this country has probably the most loving people on earth. This country has, it's unbelievable. So what I didn't go right away to school because I had to learn a little bit more my language. But then I also was told that I had to serve in the United States Army. So I was drafted 11 months after I came to the United States and spent 2 years in the United States Army. And then I loved that as well, and they shipped me back to Germany. And as a matter of fact, I also was controlling the border where I escaped. Can you believe
that? Which is ironic.
Yeah, and on a Jeep with a mounted machine gun. And so if I would have had some inclination that somebody would escape and holler and scream and so forth, I would have set an international incident. But then I came out of the army, and then I took up schooling, and I also worked. I had to work. I did that mostly at night school, but I worked at Johns Hopkins University, and I also went to Johns Hopkins University for about 6 years.
And then you eventually ended up at the University of Maryland. You had a family of 6. You met your wife. You when you're back in Germany, and the story is all right there. Never Alone, a Chronicle. And the key here is God was helping to plan your steps everywhere along the way. You can order the book by going to the website neveraloneachronicle.com. You can find the email there. You can order it from there, or you can check it out on Facebook. And again, like it on Facebook. Go there right now. Neveraloneachronicle.com. The story of a man who had a dream, and he had a God who helped him to succeed in that dream. He's been very successful here in the country since. It's a story of America, a place of promise, and it's a story by Paul Tittel. Never Alone, a Chronicle. Check it out again at neveraloneachronicle.com. Paul, we'll leave a little mystery for him to read the rest of this, but thank you for joining me this morning. It's really been a wonderful experience hearing your story.
Thank you very much, Gary, and I really thank you for inviting me and promoting the book. I really appreciate it.
Real pleasure. Never Alone, a Chronicle by Paul Tittel.